The coffee was still hot in my hand when the office door burst open. And in less than 60 seconds, I, the one who'd held this company together through its worst crisis, was thrown out like yesterday's trash. He thought he'd won. He thought removing the old guard was his first brilliant move as the new CEO. But what he didn't know was that he'd just awakened something he had no idea how to stop. Something that had been quietly holding every critical piece of this empire together. Me. My name is Samantha Cross. And for 12 years, I've been the backbone of Northwell Dynamics. 38 years old, Director of Client Strategy. And the woman who just got fired by a spoiled brat who couldn't negotiate his way out of a paper bag. You're fired! Those two words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Aaron Whitford, all of 28 years old, designer suit worth more than most people's monthly salary, sat behind his father's desk. No, his desk now. With the kind of smirk that made you want to introduce his face to the mahogany surface. I stood there, coffee still warm in my hand, watching this child play CEO. He'd been in charge for exactly 43 hours. His father, Richard, had stepped down last week for health reasons, handing the reins to his Harvard-educated, zero-experience son. And apparently, Aaron's first executive decision was to clean house. I'm sorry, what? My voice came out steadier than I felt. You heard me? He leaned back, fingers steepled like he'd seen in some leadership TED Talk. Northwell needs fresh energy, new perspectives. The old guard has had their time. Old guard, I almost laughed. I was the one who'd saved this company from bankruptcy 3 years ago when our biggest client pulled out. I was the one who worked 18-hour days restructuring our entire service model. I was the one who brought in $47 million in new contracts last quarter alone. Aaron, I tried, setting my coffee on his desk, a small act of defiance as he hadn't offered me a seat. The Ethereum Fusion deal closes in 5 days. I've been managing that relationship for 8 months. Miles will take over. He waved his hand dismissively. He's younger, hungrier, more aligned with my vision. Miles. The kid who thought ROI stood for return on Instagram. The one who'd asked me last week what a non-disclosure agreement was. Your vision? I couldn't help it. What vision would that be, exactly? His jaw tightened. Good. Let him squirm. The future of this company doesn't concern you anymore, Samantha. He stood up, all 6'2" of entitled privilege. Security will escort you out. You have 15 minutes to clear your desk. 15 minutes. 12 years condensed into 15 minutes. I looked at him then, really looked at him. Soft hands that had never known a real day's work. Eyes that held all the arrogance of someone who'd been born on third base and thought he'd hit a triple. He had no idea what he'd just done. No concept of the grenade he'd just pulled the pin on. You know what, Aaron? I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip. You're right. This doesn't concern me anymore. I turned and walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the Italian marble his father had installed when the company first turned profitable, back when I was working 100-hour weeks to land our first major contract. Oh, and Samantha? His voice followed me, dripping with false sympathy. This is business, nothing personal. I stopped at the door, hand on the handle. Every fiber of my being wanted to turn around and tell him exactly what would happen to his precious company without me. How the Ethereum deal had a key personnel clause. How I was the only one who knew the real terms they'd accept. How their CFO only trusted me because I'd learned German just to speak with him in his native language. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, not at him, but at the door. At the future he couldn't see coming. You're right, Aaron. It's just business. The door closed behind me with a soft click. In the hallway, 2 security guards waited, their faces apologetic but professional. I knew them both, had attended their kids' graduations, for God's sake. As they walked me to my office, past the cubicles of colleagues too shocked or too scared to make eye contact, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger anymore, not even hurt. Clarity. Aaron Whitford thought he'd just eliminated a threat to his new regime, What he'd actually done was set me free. Free to watch him destroy everything his father built. Free to let him discover exactly how much weight I'd been carrying. The thought echoed in my mind as I packed my desk, taking only my personal items and leaving behind every note, every file, every piece of institutional knowledge that might help them navigate what was coming. You think this is over? No, Aaron. This is just the opening act. The highway stretched ahead like a gray ribbon, and I drove without music, letting the silence fill the space where my rage had been. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as memories flooded back uninvited. 12 years. God, where had they gone? I remembered my first day at Northwell, nervous and eager. Richard Whitford himself showing me around the office. "We don't just hire employees here, Samantha," he'd said. "We build family." What a joke that turned out to be. The exit for my neighborhood came and went. I wasn't ready to go home yet. Wasn't ready to face the emptiness of my apartment that I'd barely seen in the last 3 months. Instead, I kept driving, my mind replaying every sacrifice I'd made for that company. My sister's wedding in Napa, missed it for a client emergency. My nephew's first birthday, on a plane to Shanghai to save a deal that was falling apart. Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, all spent in that goddamn office, building something I thought mattered. The Ethereum fusion deal. Jesus Christ, the Ethereum deal. I pulled into a rest stop, needing air, needing space to think. The January cold bit at my face as I stood by my car, but it felt good. Real. 8 months. That's how long I'd been courting Ethereum, a Swiss energy conglomerate looking to expand into the American renewable sector. $1.9 billion. The kind of deal that transforms a company from successful to legendary. I'd started with nothing but a cold LinkedIn message to their head of acquisitions. Learned that he was a wine enthusiast, so I studied viticulture for weeks just to hold a conversation. Found out their CFO, Hans Muller, preferred conducting business in German despite his fluent English. Spent my nights with Duolingo and a private tutor until I could discuss compound interest rates in his mother tongue. The integration timeline alone had taken me 2 months to perfect. Every synergy calculated, every redundancy identified, every cultural clash anticipated and addressed. I'd mapped out a 5-year strategic plan that would position Northwell as the dominant force in renewable energy solutions across 3 continents. And the contract negotiations, God, the details nobody else knew. The earn-out provisions tied to specific performance metrics that I'd personally negotiated down from impossible to achievable. The intellectual property clauses that protected Northwell's proprietary technology while allowing enough flexibility for joint development. The escape clause that Ethereum had wanted, the one I'd managed to bury in subsection 47B, where it would require board approval from both sides to activate. But there was one detail Aaron didn't know about. Couldn't know about because I'd never put it in writing. Section 23.4. Key personnel retention. Ethereum had insisted on it after their last acquisition fell apart when the lead strategist quit. The deal was contingent on certain essential personnel remaining with Northwell through the transition period. 3 names were on that list. Richard Whitford was one, though his retirement had been pre-negotiated and approved. The head of R&D was another. The third name was mine. If any of us left before the deal closed, Ethereum could walk away with no penalty. Worse, Northwell would owe them a breakup fee of $50 million. I laughed out loud in that empty rest stop, the sound harsh and bitter in the cold air. Aaron had no idea. He'd just triggered a clause that would cost the company $50 million, plus the loss of a transformative deal. My phone buzzed. 14 missed calls already. 3 from HR, 2 from legal, and surprisingly, 4 from Richard's personal number. The word was already spreading. I ignored them all and got back in my car. Let them sweat. Let them scramble through my files, trying to piece together 8 months of relationship building, cultural navigation, and strategic planning. Let Miles try to explain to Hans Muller why the person he'd been working with exclusively was suddenly gone. The anger was transforming now, crystallizing into something colder, more focused. I'd given everything to Northwell Dynamics, sacrificed relationships, missed moments I'd never get back, poured my soul into building something meaningful. And Aaron Whitford had dismissed me in less than 60 seconds. As I finally turned toward home, one thought kept cycling through my mind. He'd just shot himself in the foot with a $50 million bullet. The question was, would I be the one to tell him, or would I let him figure it out himself when Ethereum's lawyers came calling? My phone rang again. Richard. Again. This time, I smiled. Let him wait. Let them all wait. They'd made it clear I was replaceable, outdated, part of the old guard that needed clearing out. Tomorrow morning, they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. I was already awake, had been since 4, sitting at my kitchen counter with black coffee and my laptop, updating my LinkedIn profile with surgical precision. Former Director of Client Strategy at Northwell Dynamics. The word former tasted like battery acid, but it was necessary. Richard Whitford's name flashed on my screen. 15 calls since yesterday. This was 16. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Samantha. His voice was hoarse, strained, not the commanding tone I remembered from board meetings. Thank God. Richard. I kept my voice neutral, professional, the same tone I'd used with difficult clients. What the hell happened? I just got off a call with Hans Mueller. He's threatening to pull out of the deal. Says his key contact was terminated without consultation. I took a sip of coffee. Let the silence stretch. In negotiations, the first person to speak loses. Samantha, are you there? I'm here. I need you to tell me exactly what Aaron did. You should ask your son that question. I'm asking you. A pause. I could hear his labored breathing. The heart condition that forced his retirement was clearly taking its toll. Please. Your son fired me yesterday morning, gave me 15 minutes to clear my desk, said Northwell needed fresh energy and that Miles would be taking over the Ethereum account. Miles? The disbelief in his voice was almost comical. Miles Chapman? The kid who thought Luxembourg was in Germany? The very same. Jesus Christ. A long exhale. Samantha, I had no idea. I swear to you, I never authorized this. Well, Aaron seemed quite confident in his authority. He doesn't understand. Richard stopped himself, and I could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. Are you aware of the key personnel clause in the Ethereum contract? There it was. I should be, I said evenly. I negotiated it. Then, you know what this means. $50 million breakup fee, plus losing the deal entirely. That sounds like Northwell's problem, not mine. Samantha. Richard, I gave 12 years to your company. I missed my father's 70th birthday to close the Meridian deal. I developed chronic insomnia working through the 2021 crisis. I learned German, for God's sake, and your son threw me out like garbage. I know, and I don't want apologies. Silence. Then, quietly, what do you want? I stood up, walked to my window. The city was waking up. People heading to jobs where they were valued, or at least, pretending to be. Hans Mueller called me last night, I said. Personally. Did you know that? Richard's sharp intake of breath told me he didn't. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in leading Ethereum's North American expansion. Apparently, they were more interested in acquiring me than Northwell. The company was just a convenient vehicle. Samantha, please. But here's the interesting thing. Richard, Section 23(4) doesn't just specify that I need to be employed by Northwell. It specifies that I need to be actively engaged in the transaction in a senior strategic capacity. Yes, I know. Which means you can't just hire me back as a consultant or in some diminished role. I'd need to be reinstated at my full position, with full authority over the deal. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Aaron will never agree to that, he finally said. Then you have a $50 million problem. There has to be another way. There is. I interrupted. I walk away, take Hans's offer, and Northwell can explain to its shareholders how the new CEO destroyed the biggest deal in company history on his second day. You wouldn't do that. You care too much about the people there, the team you built. The team that watched security escort me out yesterday? The team that was too scared to even make eye contact? Another silence. Then, a different tone in his voice. Calculating. The Richard Whitford who'd built an empire from nothing. What would it take to bring you back? Full reinstatement, a written apology from Aaron in front of the entire senior staff, complete autonomy over the Ethereum deal with no interference from him, and a new contract with a golden parachute that makes it very, very expensive to fire me again. That's non-negotiable. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Richard covering the phone, talking to someone. When he came back, his voice was resigned. Aaron's here, he's resistant. Then I guess we're done. Wait. More muffled conversation. Then, louder, angrier voices. I could make out Aaron's entitled whine even through Richard's hand over the phone. Finally, Richard came back on. Can you be here at noon? Full reinstatement, full authority over Ethereum. The rest we'll discuss. And Aaron. Aaron will do what's necessary to save this company, even if I have to remind him who still owns 51% of it. I smiled. The first genuine smile in 24 hours. Noon, it is. Samantha? Richard's voice softened. I really am sorry. This never should have happened. No, I agreed. It shouldn't have. I hung up and walked back to my coffee. The game wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, I held all the cards. I let them wait. The call started at 8 a.m. HR at 8:15, legal at 8:30. By 9, even the receptionist was texting me, probably pressed into service to beg me to answer. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter like an angry wasp while I took my time getting ready. I chose my outfit carefully. The black Armani suit, the one I'd bought with my first bonus. The Louboutins that added 3 inches to my 5'6" frame. The watch my team had given me after we'd closed the Meridian deal. Every piece chosen to send a message. I'm not crawling back. I'm walking in on my terms. At 11:45, I pulled into Northwell's parking garage. My access card had been deactivated. Of course it had, so I had to use the visitor entrance. The security guard, Marcus, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ms. Cross? But I thought, I have a noon meeting with Richard Whitford. His fingers fumbled over the keyboard. Yes. Ma'am. You're on the list. Executive floor. Should I call up and... That won't be necessary. The elevator ride felt different this time. Yesterday, I'd been escorted down like a criminal. Today, I rode up alone, watching the floors tick by. 4th floor. Accounting, where they were probably scrambling to calculate the breakup fee. 7th floor. Legal. Likely drowning in Ethereum's contract subsections. 10th floor. Sales. Where Miles was probably Googling how to speak German right about now. Executive floor. 14th. The elevator doors opened to orchestrated chaos. People were literally running between offices. Papers scattered across the usually pristine reception desk. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Aaron Whitford. His perfect hair slightly messed, his designer tie loosened. He saw me and froze. Samantha. The word came out like he was chewing glass. Aaron. I walked past him without stopping, heading for the boardroom where Richard had said to meet. The click of my heels on marble was the only sound as everyone in the vicinity stopped to stare. Wait. Aaron caught up, his longer legs making it easy. We need to talk. We really don't. Look, about yesterday. I stopped so abruptly he almost ran into me, turned, looked him straight in the eye. Yesterday, you made a business decision. Today, your father is making another one. That's all this is. His jaw clenched. You think you've won something here? I think your company is about to lose $50 million plus a transformative deal unless you get out of my way and let me work. This is extortion. No. Aaron, this is consequence. Richard's voice cut through the tension. That's enough. He stood in the boardroom doorway, looking every one of his 68 years. The heart condition had taken weight off him, made his expensive suit hang loose, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Samantha, thank you for coming. I walked into the boardroom, noting who was already there. The entire senior leadership team, looking like they'd been dragged from their offices, legal, with contracts spread across the table, HR, pale and nervous. And Hans Müller, joining via video from Zurich, his expression unreadable. Shall we begin? Richard took his seat at the head of the table, the seat Aaron had occupied yesterday when he'd fired me. Before we proceed, Hans's accented English filled the room from the screen. I need to be very clear. Ethereum entered this arrangement with specific expectations. Ms. Cross was not just a contact, she was the architect of this integration. Without her, we have no confidence in Northwell's ability to execute. Aaron, who'd slunk in behind us, spoke up. Mr. Muller, I assure you, our team is fully capable. Are you fluent in German, Mr. Whitford? No, but... Do you understand the Swiss regulatory framework for energy sector acquisitions? We have people who... Do you know why I insisted on the 17-month transition period rather than the standard 12? Aaron's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I answered for him. Because Ethereum's fiscal year ends in July, not December, and the 17-month period allows for 2 complete audit cycles while avoiding the Swiss tax implications of an 18-month transition. Hans actually smiled. Precisely. Richard cleared his throat. Samantha has agreed to return under specific conditions. Conditions? Aaron's voice cracked slightly. She should be grateful we're even. Aaron. Richard's voice could have frozen helium. Sit. Down. The son obeyed the father, and for a moment, I saw the scared little boy under all that privilege. Richard continued. Effective immediately. Samantha Cross is reinstated as Director of Client Strategy with full authority over the Ethereum transaction. She will report directly to me for the duration of this deal. You're removing me from the chain of command? Aaron's face flushed red. I'm ensuring this deal closes. Richard replied coldly. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the board how you lost us $50 million in your first week as CEO. The room went silent except for the hum of the video connection. Furthermore, Richard continued, reading from a document. Ms. Cross will receive a new employment contract with enhanced termination protection and compensation adjustment reflecting her critical role in this transaction. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I was savoring every second. This is temporary, Aaron said, looking at me. Once the deal closes, I interrupted, we'll see where things stand. Won't we? Hans Müller cleared his throat on the screen. If I may, Ethereum would also like assurances that Ms. Cross will be leading the post-merger integration team. Of course, Richard said quickly. That's at least 2 years. Aaron protested. 2.5, actually, I corrected. Based on the timeline I developed, Richard stood, signaling the meeting's end. Samantha, your office has been restored. Everything should be as you left it. I trust you can have a status update on Ethereum ready by end of day. Already prepared. I pulled a USB drive from my bag, slid it across to him. I spent yesterday evening updating all the documentation. We're still on track to close Friday, assuming no further disruptions. Aaron stormed out without another word. Others filed out quietly, carefully not meeting my eyes, respect or fear. I wasn't sure I cared which. Richard lingered. Samantha. Save it, Richard. This isn't forgiveness. This is business. He nodded slowly. I know. But still. Thank you. I walked back to my office, my corner office with its view of the city, my photos back on the desk, my 12 years of achievements framed on the wall. Everything exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. A resignation letter sat on my desk, predated to yesterday. Aaron's final attempt at control. I fed it into the shredder, watching it turn to confetti. Then I sat down, picked up my phone, and dialed Hans Mueller's private line. Hans, it's Samantha. Yes, I'm back. Now, let's talk about those final terms. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes Manhattan's skyline look like it was etched in glass. The Ethereum delegation would be here in 2 hours, and I'd been in the office since 5 a.m., reviewing every detail one final time. The boardroom had been transformed into a war room. 3 translators on standby, though I wouldn't need them. Contracts in triplicate, a direct line to our legal team in Zurich. Everything choreographed down to the minute. At 7 a.m., my team started arriving. The real team, the ones who'd worked 18-hour days with me to make this happen, they moved with the precision of a surgical unit, each knowing their role without being told. Ms. Cross? Jennifer from legal approached with a tablet. We've received confirmation from Swiss regulatory. All clearances approved. And the escrow accounts? Verified and ready. The funds will transfer the moment signatures are complete. Perfect. At 8:30, I saw Aaron lurking outside the boardroom's glass walls. Richard had explicitly banned him from the meeting. But here he was, circling like a shark who smelled blood but couldn't find the source. I ignored him and switched to German with my team, running through the final negotiation points. The look on his face when he realized he couldn't understand a word. Priceless. The Ethereum delegation arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Hans Mueller leading, followed by 6 executives and their legal counsel. I greeted them in German, then French for their CFO who preferred it, then back to English for the formal introductions. Samantha. Hans clasped my hand warmly. It's good to see you where you belong. Aaron, still watching from outside, looked like he was chewing nails. The meeting was a symphony I'd been conducting for 8 months. Every concern addressed before it was raised. Every document produced before it was requested. When Hans mentioned a minor concern about intellectual property overlap, I pulled out a pre-prepared analysis I'd commissioned 3 months ago, anticipating this exact question. How did you? Hans's CFO, Pierre, looked genuinely impressed. You mentioned your concern about IP overlap during our dinner in Geneva. I replied in French. The one where you ordered the Chassela wine from Lavaux. I took the liberty of preparing a comprehensive review. Pierre laughed, delighted. You remember the wine? I remember everything that matters. By 11 a.m., we were on the signature pages. $1.9 billion, about to transform Northwell from a mid-sized player to an industry giant. The legal teams were reviewing final clauses when Hans raised his hand. There is one more matter, he said, his English suddenly formal. The management structure post-merger. My stomach tightened. This wasn't in the agenda. We've been impressed with Ms. Cross's handling of this transaction. Hans continued. So impressed that we'd like to propose an amendment. We want Samantha to lead the combined entity strategic operations division, not just the integration, permanently. The room went silent. Even the lawyers stopped shuffling papers. That's a C-suite position, Richard said slowly. Executive Vice President, to be precise. Hans replied. Reporting directly to the merged entities board, not to the CEO. Not to Aaron. The unspoken words hung in the air like a challenge. This is highly irregular, Richard said, but I could hear the calculation in his voice. He knew refusing might risk the deal. Samantha, Hans looked at me directly. Would you consider this? I let the silence stretch, feeling Aaron's eyes burning through the glass wall. I'd need to see the full terms, but I'm interested. Excellent, Pierre. Pierre produced another contract, one they'd clearly prepared in advance. The salary figure made my poker face slip for just a moment. It was 3 times what I currently made. We'll need time to review. Richard started. Of course, Hans agreed. Shall we say 30 minutes? But I should mention, this is a package deal. The acquisition and the management structure, both or neither. Checkmate. Richard called a recess, and the Ethereum team filed out for coffee. The moment they were gone, Aaron burst in. This is manipulation. He slammed his hands on the table. They're trying to stage a coup. They're trying to protect their investment, I said calmly. They want leadership they trust. You planned this. He pointed at me, his finger shaking. You've been planning this all along. Actually, no. This was all Hans. Though I can't say I'm surprised. When you fire the architect of a $2 billion deal, people notice. Dad, you can't seriously be considering. I'm considering what's best for the company. Richard cut him off. 51% ownership means nothing if the company becomes worthless. So you're choosing her over your own son? Richard's face went cold. You chose this path when you fired the most valuable employee we had out of ego. Aaron turned to me, his face red. You think you've won? You think you can just waltz in and take over? I think, I said, standing to face him, that actions have consequences. You wanted to play CEO. Well, this is what it looks like when you play badly. I'll make your life hell. You already tried that. How'd it work out? Richard stepped between us. Aaron, leave, now. But, now! Aaron stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass walls. Richard turned to me. You know, accepting this position means working with him for at least the next 2 years. I know. He won't make it easy. He already hasn't. Richard studied me for a long moment. The board will approve this. They have to. The deal's too important. But Samantha, this changes everything. You'll have more power than Aaron in many ways. I know that too. Then you also know he'll try to sabotage you. I smiled then, the kind of smile that had closed $100 million deals. Let him try. 30 minutes later, Hans and his team returned. Richard had called an emergency board vote, unanimous approval, with one abstention. Aaron, of course. By noon, the signatures were complete. $1.9 billion secured. And Samantha Cross, the woman who'd been escorted out by security 3 days ago, was now Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations for the soon-to-be-merged Northwell Ethereum entity. As Hans signed the final page, he looked up at me and winked. Sometimes, Samantha, the best revenge is massive success. I thought about Aaron, probably raging in his office, watching his authority evaporate with each pen stroke. Yes, I agreed. Sometimes it is. The call came at 2 p.m. Monday afternoon, 3 days after the Ethereum deal closed. Samantha? It was Pierre, Hans's CFO, and his voice was tight with concern. We have a problem. I set down my coffee, already knowing this wouldn't be good. What kind of problem? We received an email from you this morning, or rather, what appeared to be from you. It suggested significant changes to the integration timeline and budget allocations. My blood went cold. Pierre, I didn't send any email to you this morning. I thought as much. The language was off, too aggressive. Not your style. But Samantha, it came from your official Northwell email address. Forward it to me immediately. The email arrived in seconds. As I read it, my jaw clenched. It was subtle sabotage, just believable enough to cause confusion, just wrong enough to damage relationships. The proposed changes would add 6 months to integration and cost an extra $40 million. Pierre, this is falsified. I need you to trust me on this. I do trust you. That's why I called instead of escalating to the board. But Samantha, if someone can forge emails from your account, I'll handle it. Give me 24 hours. I hung up and immediately called Tom from IT. Tom, I need you in my office, now. And bring your forensic toolkit. While waiting, I pulled up the email headers, looking for anomalies. There, a tiny discrepancy in the routing path. The email had originated internally, but not from my machine. Tom arrived in 5 minutes, laptop in hand. Ms. Cross? Someone sent a forged email from my account to Ethereum. I need to know who, when, and from where. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The email originated from the executive floor. Timestamp shows 6:43 a.m. this morning. Can you get more specific? Working on it. The MAC address traces to... Hold on, this is weird. It's from a machine in the executive conference room, but logged in with temporary credentials created by... He paused, his face paling. By who? Tom. By an admin account linked to the CEO's office. Aaron, of course. Can you prove the trail? Every keystroke is logged, Ms. and Cross. But I should warn you, if I pull these logs officially, protocol requires me to report it to the CEO. Who is Aaron? Yes. I thought for a moment. Tom. Do you remember who authorized your promotion last year? You did, Ms. Cross. You're. And who fought for the IT department's budget when Aaron wanted to cut it by 40% last week? That was also you. Then perhaps you could do a thorough security audit of our email systems. A very thorough audit. One that might uncover any vulnerabilities. Tom's eyes lit up with understanding. A comprehensive audit would take me about, 24 hours, and I'd need to document everything I find for security purposes? That sounds very thorough. I should probably also check for other compromised emails, in case this is a pattern. That would be prudent. After Tom left, I called Laura Finch, our chief audit officer. Laura was a bloodhound when it came to corporate misconduct, and more importantly, she reported to the board, not to Aaron. Laura, I need an internal investigation opened immediately. Regarding potential email fraud and sabotage of the Ethereum integration. That's a serious allegation. Samantha, I have IT pulling logs as we speak, but Laura, this goes high, very high. A pause. How high? Corner office high. Jesus. Another pause. You have proof? I will within 24 hours. Then I'll prep the board. Samantha, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. That evening, Tom delivered. The digital trail was damning, not just one forged email, but 3 others prepped and scheduled to send over the next week, each one designed to gradually erode Ethereum's confidence in me and, by extension, the merger. But Aaron had made one crucial mistake. He'd used his assistant's account to cover his tracks, not knowing that she'd quit last Friday, another casualty of his management style. Her access should have been revoked, but HR was backlogged. The ghost account left fingerprints everywhere. Tom had found more, much more. Mrs. Cross, he's been reading your emails, all of them, for the past week. That's illegal. It's also traceable. Every access is logged. He even forwarded some to an external address. Looks like a consultant. Want to bet they were planning to use your strategies against you? Download everything, every log, every timestamp, every byte of data. Already done. 3 encrypted copies, 1 for you, 1 for legal, and 1 for, well, let's call it insurance. Tuesday morning, I arrived early, but not as early as the forensic IT team Laura had brought in. They were imaging hard drives, pulling server logs, documenting everything. Aaron arrived at 8 a.m. to find his office being searched. What the hell is going on? His voice carried across the entire floor. Laura stepped forward, calm and professional. Mr. Whitford, we're conducting an investigation into potential corporate espionage and email fraud. On whose authority? The board's. She handed him a letter. You're suspended pending investigation. Please surrender your access cards and company devices. His face went from red to white. This is her doing, isn't it? That bitch? Mr. Whitford, I'd advise you to stop talking. Anything you say can be used in the investigation. He saw me then, standing by my office door, watching. You set me up. I walked over, keeping my voice level. No, Aaron. You tried to destroy my reputation with forged emails. You tried to sabotage a $2 billion merger out of spite. You set yourself up. You can't prove. Your assistant's access logs, the conference room computer, the email routing paths, the external consultant you were feeding my emails to. I counted on my fingers. Would you like me to continue? His lawyer arrived then, sweating despite the morning cool. Aaron, don't say another word. But Aaron's ego couldn't let it go. You think you're so smart, but you're just an employee. I'm a Whitford. This company has my name on it. Actually, Richard's voice came from behind us. It has my name on it. We all turned. Richard stood there, looking every inch the titan who'd built this empire. Dad, she destroyed evidence of your corporate espionage, uncovered your attempts to sabotage a merger that will define this company's future? Yes, Aaron, she did. You're taking her side? I'm taking the company's side. You're done, Aaron. The board will vote you out within the hour. You can't. 51% says I can. Aaron looked between us, his world crumbling. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. The boardroom was packed. Every member had flown in, even Harrison from Tokyo. This wasn't a conference call kind of meeting. This was a public execution, and everyone wanted a front row seat. Laura Finch stood at the presentation screen, her evidence laid out with prosecutorial precision. Email logs, timeline charts, forensic IT reports, each slide another nail in Aaron's coffin. The investigation has uncovered systematic unauthorized access to executive email accounts, Laura said, her voice clinical. Forged communications to our merger partners, attempted sabotage of a $2 billion transaction. Aaron sat at the far end of the table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. His usual arrogance had curdled into something desperate. Furthermore, Laura continued, clicking to the next slide. We discovered correspondence with Kronos Consulting, a firm known for corporate espionage and hostile takeover facilitation. Mr. Whitford had shared confidential integration plans, seeking ways to, quote, make her look incompetent. There it was, his exact words, pulled from his sent folder. Board member Patricia Hayes, 73 years old and tough as industrial steel, leaned forward. Mr. Whitford, do you have anything to say in your defense? Aaron stood, his hands shaking slightly. This is a witch hunt. Samantha Cross has manipulated. Stop. Richard's voice cut through the room. Aaron, I've seen the evidence. We've all seen it. You accessed her emails 247 times in 6 days. You created fraudulent communications that could have cost us $50 million in breakup fees. You conspired with external consultants to undermine a board-approved transaction. She took my job. She saved your job. Without her, there would be no company left for you to inherit. Patricia spoke again. Motion to remove Aaron Whitford as CEO, effective immediately. Seconded, said Harrison. All in favor. Every hand raised except one, Aaron's own futile gesture of defiance. Motion carries. Mr. Whitford, you're terminated for cause. Security will escort you out. But Aaron wasn't done. He stood, his face twisted with rage. You think this is over? I own shares. I'm still a Whitford. I'll sue every one of you. Actually, the company's general counsel interrupted. The termination for cause clause in your contract includes a clawback provision. Your unvested shares, approximately 18% of your holdings, revert to the company. Aaron's lawyer grabbed his arm. We're leaving. Now. As security approached, Aaron looked directly at me. You destroyed my life. No, I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. You destroyed your life. I just documented it. After he was escorted out, Richard stood. The board needs to appoint an interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement. Patricia smiled, a shark's grin that had terrified boardrooms for 5 decades. I moved to appoint Samantha Cross as interim CEO. My heart stopped. She doesn't have CEO experience, one member ventured. Neither did Aaron, Patricia replied dryly. And she just closed the biggest deal in company history while navigating attempted sabotage from the inside. I'd say she's proven herself. Yo, but she's already EVP of Strategic Operations for the merged entity, which makes her perfectly positioned to lead both organizations through integration. Harrison added, the synergies are obvious. Richard looked at me. Samantha, would you accept? The room waited. This wasn't in my plan. I'd wanted vindication. Yes. Justice. Absolutely. But CEO? I'll accept on one condition, I said. This isn't about revenge or personal ambition. If I take this role, it's to ensure the Ethereum merger succeeds and Northwell emerges stronger. I'll want performance metrics, clear success criteria, and a review in 6 months. That's why you should be CEO, Patricia said, because your first thought is the company, not the title. The vote was unanimous. 3 hours later, I stood in what had been Aaron's office, my office now, looking out at the city. The afternoon sun painted Manhattan in golden shadow. My phone buzzed, Hans Müller calling from Zurich. Samantha, I heard the news. Congratulations, CEO Cross. It's interim, Hans. For now. But we both know you'll excel. You always do. After the call, I walked through the executive floor. People who'd avoided eye contact a week ago now nodded respectfully. The security guards who'd escorted me out stood straighter when I passed. But I didn't feel triumphant, just resolved. Laura Finch knocked and entered. The prosecutors want to know if we're pressing criminal charges against Aaron. I thought about it. What's your recommendation? Forensic evidence is solid, corporate espionage, fraud, attempted sabotage. He's looking at serious jail time. But it would mean months of trials, media attention, distraction from the merger. I turn from the window. Offer him a deal. He signs a non-disclosure agreement, agrees to sell his remaining shares back to the company at market rate, and never works in this industry again. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges. That's generous. That's strategic. I want him gone, not martyred. Laura nodded and left. Alone again. I thought about the last week. From fired to CEO, it should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the beginning of real work. My phone rang. Richard. Samantha, thank you. For everything. Richard. I failed the company by putting Aaron in charge. I let nepotism override judgment. You saved us from my mistake. He's still your son. Yes. And that's my burden to carry. But Samantha? Don't let guilt about Aaron cloud your leadership. You earned this. That evening, as I finally prepared to leave, I found a note on my desk. Aaron's former assistant, had left it. Ms. Cross, thank you for showing that bullies don't always win. Watching you this week gave me the courage to report what he asked me to do. Good luck. Jennifer. I tucked the note into my desk drawer. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration meetings, strategy sessions, the overwhelming responsibility of leading 2 companies through a complex merger. But tonight, I stood in my new office, looking out at the city lights beginning to sparkle, and allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Aaron thought he'd ended my career with 2 words. You're fired. Instead, he'd unleashed something he never saw coming. A woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. The board had given me 6 months to prove myself. I'd need 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, I stood in my office as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the skyline in shades of amber and rosy. The integration was ahead of schedule. Stock prices had climbed 37%. The board had just voted, unanimously, to remove interim from my title. I was officially CEO of Northwell Ethereum Dynamics. The journey from that humiliating morning to this moment felt like a lifetime compressed into weeks. But the real closure came in an unexpected form. A knock at my door. Come in. It was Richard, looking healthier than he had in months. "Samantha, there's someone here to see you." Behind him stood Aaron. My hand instinctively moved toward the security button, but Richard raised his hand. "It's okay. He's here to sign the papers." Aaron looked different. The arrogance had been replaced by something else, not quite humility, but perhaps awareness. He carried a folder of documents. "5 minutes," I said. "Richard stays." Aaron nodded. He placed the papers on my desk. The share transfer agreements, the non-disclosure documents, everything Laura had demanded. "I've signed them all," he said quietly. "The shares will transfer Monday. I'm moving to London, starting over." I reviewed the signatures, saying nothing. He started, stopped, then tried again. "The Ethereum deal. It was brilliant. I see that now." "It was never about being brilliant," I replied. "It was about doing the work." He nodded slowly. "My father was right. I wasn't ready. Maybe I'll never be ready for something like this. Maybe not. Or maybe you'll learn from this and become someone different. That's up to you." Aaron looked at his father, then back at me. "For what it's worth, the company is in better hands." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Samantha, that morning when I fired you, I thought power meant making people fear you. You taught me something different. Power is making people believe in something bigger than themselves." "No, Aaron," I said. "Power is delivering on that belief." He left without another word. Richard lingered. "That was generous of you," he said. "That was closure," I corrected. "For all of us." After Richard left, I returned to the window. The city sprawled below, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. Somewhere out there, Aaron was packing his life into boxes, preparing for exile. Somewhere else, Hans Muller was probably raising a glass of Swiss wine to celebrate our first successful quarter. But I wasn't thinking about any of them. I was thinking about Jennifer's note, still in my drawer, about Tom from IT, who'd risked his job to expose the truth, about the dozens of people who'd worked tirelessly to make the merger succeed, about the security guard Marcus, who'd looked so conflicted that day he'd escorted me out. They were the real power, not the corner office or the title or even the vindication. It was the knowledge that when everything was on the line, good people had stood up for what was right. My phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from the board, interview requests from Forbes and Wall Street Journal, an invitation to speak at Wharton. I ignored them all. Instead, I pulled up an email and started typing. "All staff. This week marks not just the successful completion of our merger, but the beginning of something extraordinary. Each of you contributed to this moment, from IT to legal, from security to sales. You proved that a company's greatest asset isn't its contracts or its capital, it's its people. As we move forward, remember this. True strength doesn't need to announce itself with arrogance or intimidation. It shows up in the work. It lives in the details. It thrives in collaboration. 6 weeks ago, someone tried to tear this company apart from the inside. They failed because you, all of you, are the foundation that couldn't be shaken. Thank you for your trust, your dedication, and your integrity. The best is yet to come. Samantha Cross, CEO. I hit send and watched as the email went to all 3,000 employees across our offices worldwide. Then I gathered my things, shut down my computer, and headed for the elevator. In the lobby, Marcus was just ending his shift. "Have a good evening, Ms. Cross," he said with genuine warmth. "You too, Marcus. And thank you for everything." He smiled, understanding. As I walked out into the New York evening, the city humming with its endless energy, I thought about that morning 6 weeks ago when I'd been escorted from this building in humiliation. How certain Aaron had been that he'd won. How sure he was that removing me would make him stronger. He'd learned the hard way what I'd always known. Real power isn't given or inherited or seized, it's earned. And once earned, truly earned through competence, integrity, and respect. It can't be taken away by anyone's ego or insecurity. The thought made me smile as I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. "Finally home." As the taxi pulled into traffic, I looked back at the Northwell Ethereum building one last time, its logo gleaming against the darkening sky. Power doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be present. And I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Samantha's position? Your stories and perspectives make this community special. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by those who try to diminish you, but by the strength you show when you rise above